swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please state your full name and spell your last name for the record.
Hector Bertrand, B as in boy, E-R-T-R-A-N-D.
Please make yourself a reference record. State your main inquiry.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Detective Bertrand.
Good afternoon.
Where do you work?
City of Miramar Police Department
How long have you worked in the City of Miramar Police Department?
since October of 1992.
What's your job there?
I'm currently assigned to the homicide unit.
When did you get assigned to the homicide unit?
I've been in the Detective Bureau for approximately 22 years. I've been in homicide for approximately 10 of that time. I was also in the narcotics unit and in sex crimes.
Okay. Any other law enforcement experience with the Miramar Police Department before you became a detective?
A couple years on the road also.
Any other law enforcement experience with any other agency?
No, ma'am.
During your 10 years in the homicide unit as a detective, how many homicide cases have you worked up?
Objection, Your Honor.
Overruled.
Go ahead.
Our city typically has approximately 10 or so homicides a year, and so of those 10, we have a rotation, but normally when a homicide happens, because it's a small unit, everybody works the homicide. So one person will be the lead, but everybody will assist from the unit.
I'm going to draw your attention to April 25th, 2014. Were you working as a homicide detective for the Miramar Police Department on that date?
Yes, ma'am.
Were you assigned to a case on that date?
Yes.
How did you get assigned to the case?
Well, initially, Detective Zeller got called out. He was on call out. We rotate call outs. And so initially he was called out, reference to a stabbing, but then the victim passed away. And at that point, I was next on the homicide rotation. So he called me and said, hey, we just had someone pass away. You're up. So I came out to the scene, and I became lead.
Where did you first go?
To the scene.
On April 25th, 2014?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you recall approximately what time you got to the crime scene?
I got there, I arrived on scene at 23:05 hours.
And when you got to the scene, what other law enforcement officers were already there?
There was, there was Detective Zeller, there was Detective Slosher. There was also numerous other road patrol officers that were securing the scene. And
what is the first thing tell us, what is the crime scene that you reported to?
Well, when I first got there, I got to Terra Road and Miramar Parkway, and
what city is that in?
That was actually I'm sorry?
What city is that in?
That was in the city of Miramar.
And what county?
Broward County.
Okay, go ahead.
And right at the intersection, there's a stop sign. You can either go left or right, which is going to be east or west on Miramar Parkway. And there's a stop sign, and behind the stop sign, there was some articles on the floor. Specifically, there was a $20 bill with some blood stain. There was like a baseball hat on the floor, and there was also a the top portion of a beer bottle that was broken.
Now, who's responsible for processing the crime scene or collecting evidence from the crime scene?
Our crime scene unit.
And at this time, when you're observing the crime scene, had the crime scene unit arrived?
Yeah, I believe they were already there, yes, ma'am.
Okay. What is the next thing that you did?
I spoke to Detective Zeller. He advised me that there were some witnesses that still needed to be interviewed, and I proceeded, after he briefed me, I went ahead and started interviewing witnesses, or talking to witnesses.
Is there anything else that you did on April 25th, 2014?
No, that was pretty much it. I also walked north on Terra Road, and on the side of the road, closer to where there was a party, there was some bloody clothing, towel, some sneakers, and I was told that that was the victim's clothing.
Did you return to that crime scene the next day on April 26, 2014?
I did.
Judge, I'm showing defense counsel what's been marked as State Exhibit C and D for identification. May I approach the witness?
Yes.
Detective Bertrand, I'm showing you what's been marked as State Exhibit C for identification. Do you recognize State Exhibit C?
Yes.
Okay. How do you recognize it?
It's, well, first of all, it's not unusual for us to go back to a scene, especially because the scene when we first got there was at nighttime. So we went back the next day just to look around, see if we missed anything or what have you. And by this time we had interviewed some of the witnesses, and we started looking around. Also, we walked, since the witnesses, or one witness told us that the vehicle fled.
Objection, hearsay.
Sustained.
Okay, do you recognize State Exhibit
Yes,
C for identification? Yes. How do you recognize it?
We found it at the scene just west of Terra Road, like 2 or 3 houses west.
Is it
the front yard?
Okay, is it a photograph of an item that you found at the crime scene on April 26, 2014?
Yes, I took that photo.
Does it accurately reflect what you saw when you took the photograph?
Yes.
At this time, the state moves what's been marked as State Exhibit C into evidence.
No.
I'm also showing you, Detective Bertrand, what's been marked as State Exhibit D for identification. Do you recognize State Exhibit D?
And that's going to be number
3.
Can I open it?
Yeah, I need scissors. Yes, Detective, one moment. Is that okay, Judge? I'm going to give him the scissors.
Yes.
I'm not going to remove it because I don't have gloves, but I'm just going to look inside.
We have gloves?
Yeah.
There's gloves there.
2 detectives?
Yes, please.
He's going to look at it. Detective Bertrand, please take a look at it inside the envelope and then let me know if you recognize State Exhibit D.
Yes.
Okay, how do you recognize State Exhibit D?
What's the cup that we recovered?
At this time, Your Honor, the state moves what's been marked as State Exhibit D for identification into evidence.
Okay. What number?
4. Detective Bertrand, what is the next thing that you did after April 26, 2014?
Well, That morning, I also attended the autopsy of the victim and at the medical examiner's office.
And at this point, had you located the vehicle that was alleged to have been involved in this crime?
No.
Were you looking for it?
Yes.
What vehicle were you looking for?
Well, at the time, we had a partial tag that was given to us by one of the witnesses, and we were trying to run different combinations. I reached out to FBI, U.S. Marshals, I think Florida Highway Patrol, and plus we did our own research, and we didn't come up with anything. We later found out that the tag numbers or the combination of numbers weren't good. But eventually we did get information from a source that was cooperating.
I'm objecting based on hearsay. All hearsay.
Did you eventually locate the vehicle?
Yes, we did.
What vehicle was it?
It was an Impala, a beige Impala.
Where did you find it?
We found it on May 2nd at in Miami Gardens. Do you want the address specifically?
Yes.
6960 Northwest 186th Street, Miami Gardens.
What did you do when you located the Chevy Impala?
Well, we initially, once because we went to that particular location because the defendant was living there with his girlfriend.
Okay, so you found the...
And I drove through the entire parking lot, didn't find the specific car. Eventually, I did find it at the very end of the complex, away from where the apartment where he lived at, like almost at opposite ends of the complex. And when I observed the vehicle, I saw what appeared to be blood on the passenger side of the vehicle, on the door, the roof, the windshield, rear door, and also you can see from standing outside looking into the car, you could also see what appeared to be blood inside the car too.
Let me ask you a question about the parking lot, if you recall. Do you remember if, when you drove around the parking lot, there was any type of construction or obstruction blocking parking spaces?
No.
When you found the Chevy Impala, did you document that in any way? Or did the department document it in some way?
We called out crime scene. The vehicle was photographed on the outside. We also, Detective Zeller assisted in getting a search warrant with Miami-Dade County Police Department so that we can remove the vehicle from there and transport it to Miramar so that we can get a warrant to process the vehicle for evidence.
Did you find a knife in the Chevy Impala?
There was a like a butter knife. We didn't believe it had anything to do with.
What did you do once you processed the Chevy Impala? Anything else going on May 2nd, 2014? With you? But let me ask it this way, Detective Bertrand. From the day you were assigned, April 25th, 2014, through the date you're telling us about, you're continuously working this investigation.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I'm going to draw your attention then to May 9, 2014. Can you tell us what you were doing with this investigation as of May 9, 2014?
On May 9th, we had obtained body warrants. Previously, I believe it was on the 7th that we obtained some body warrants for both defendants. And on May 9th, we served a body warrant on a co-defendant, Armando Batista.
Okay. Were you present when that was served?
Yes.
And during the execution of that body warrant, first of all, please tell us, what is a body warrant?
It's basically a warrant so that we can get fingerprints from the defendant, palm prints, DNA, oral swabs, so that we can get their DNA, so that we can compare it to evidence collected at the scene or items from the scene.
Or photographs, or whatever you need.
Photographs, yes.
Were you, and you told us you were present when the body warrant was executed on May 9th, 2014. Who was it executed on?
On May 9th, it was on Batista.
Can you tell his full name?
Armando Batista.
I'm showing defense counsel what's been marked as state exhibit E and F for identification. May I approach the witness?
Yes.
Detective Bertrand, I'm showing you what's been marked as State Exhibit E for identification. It's a composite exhibit of 41 pages. Can you please take a look at State Exhibit E for identification and let me know if you recognize it?
This is all E? Or
Yes, it's a composite.
Okay.
It's all one exhibit.
Yeah, these are photographs that were taken by BSO crime scene on that day.
Do the photographs accurately reflect what you saw Armando Batista to look like on May 9th, 2014?
Yes, ma'am.
At this time, Your Honor, the state moves what's been marked as State Exhibit E, a composite exhibit of 41 pages, into evidence.
It's all over.
What number?
And I'm also showing Detective Bertrand, showing you what's been marked as State Exhibit F for identification. Do you recognize State Exhibit F?
Yes.
Okay. What is it?
This is a copy of the CD of the pictures that are there.
Printed.
Yes, ma'am.
At this time, Your Honor, the state moves what's been marked as State Exhibit F into evidence.
No objection. Okay.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would like to publish to the jury State Exhibit 5.
Okay.
And like yesterday, it's 41 pages, so I'll split it up, and then I'll take a moment while I'm publishing.
Yeah, if you guys want to lean over and two at once, that's fine. You can look at them individually if you like, but
Detective Bertrand,
Did you observe any injuries to Armando Batista's face?
There was not outside. He had, the only two injuries that I observed was on the inside of his lower lip. There was like a small cut. Looked like a cold sore or something like that.
objection, speculation.
sustained.
And then there was a, on his side, not sure, I don't remember right now without referring to my notes, on one of his arms on the elbow.
Judge objection, if he doesn't remember, he can refer to his notes, but he can't.
Detective Bertrand,
Hold on. That objection sustained. Go ahead.
Detective Bertrand, I want to ask you about Armando Batista's face. Did you see any bruising to his face?
No.
Did you see any swelling on his face?
No.
Did you see any cuts on his face?
No.
Anything that you documented as an injury to his face?
No.
How about his hands? Did you document any injuries on his hands?
No.
No further questions. Thank you.
Defense?
Good afternoon, Sir Henry.
Good afternoon.
Before you came in to testify today, did you review the report that you wrote?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And did you review your deposition testimony?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Did you review the reports done by any of the other detectives or officers?
I reviewed just my report and the people that I interviewed, their statement.
Okay. Prior to submitting the case to the state attorney's office, did you review the other officers and detectives' reports?
Some, I don't know if I reviewed all the reports.
Okay. And you testified you're the lead detective on this case?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So are you, is it fair to say you submitted reports to the state attorney's office on this case that you may not have reviewed?
I reviewed my reports. There are some reports that were written by other detectives that may have been submitted after the fact, and I may have read them. I don't recall right now.
Okay. Now you testified earlier that all of the, pretty much all of the detectives in your unit, there are 5 of them, is that correct?
I'm trying to think at the time. I believe, yeah, there were 5.
Okay, they were all helping out on this case.
Yes,
correct?
ma'am.
And you discussed it, the case, the progress on a daily basis with these detectives?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So it would be fair to say that if you obtained a critical piece of information in the investigation, you would share it with them and they would do the same?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. You're the lead detective, right? So these other detectives at points in the investigation were taking directives from you, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now, you testified earlier that you found out about some witnesses that needed to be interviewed on the night that you responded to the scene initially.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And the first person you spoke to was Corey McMahon, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, Corey was not cooperative with you, correct?
Yes.
He was pretty hostile, is that fair?
He wasn't hostile. He just didn't want to get involved.
Okay, didn't want to give you any information? Is that correct?
He gave a lot of information, but not to me directly,
Okay,
indirectly.
okay. So in fact, throughout most of the investigation, he was uncooperative with you, even if he was talking to other people. Correct?
That's correct.
You also interviewed his girlfriend, correct? Ms. Roberts? Do you remember that?
Yes.
Okay, she didn't really see anything, wasn't very helpful either, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. After that, you interviewed Ms. Gimbolas herself, correct?
I did.
Okay. It was your understanding she had been with Mr. Knight while this occurred?
Yes, ma'am.
When you interviewed her, it was a few hours after she talked to Detective Schlosser, correct?
That's correct.
So this is still at the scene that night, but just a little bit later?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Actually spilling over into the next morning, so now it's the morning of the 26th, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you have a conversation with Detective Schlosser about what she told him prior to taking her statement?
I spoke to him, yes.
Okay. Did you listen to the recording he made of her statement
No,
prior to?
ma'am.
Now, in that statement, you didn't talk to her about the route that they took from Hallandale heading to the Best Western by way of Miramar, did you?
Did we, I'm not, we talked about that they were going someplace else, they were going to go visit, I believe, her mom, and then along the way, they got a call from, I believe, Corey, and they went back to the house or went to go see Corey.
Okay. And you didn't ask her why she never told Schlosser about the driver and passenger kicking and punching Mr. Knight, correct?
Objection, improper impeachment, and hearsay.
Overruled.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
You didn't ask Ms. Kimball as why she didn't tell Detective Schlosser that the driver and passenger started kicking and punching Mr. Knight.
Like I said, I didn't listen to the recording prior to me interviewing her.
Okay, but you didn't speak with Detective Schlosser, you said, correct?
I did, but I don't recall how much in depth we talked about, other than that he took an initial statement from her.
Okay. At some point, did you review that statement that he took from her?
Again, I possibly did. I don't recall it right now.
Okay. And then you spoke to her again, though, a couple of weeks later, correct?
Yes.
Now, this state attorney asked you about officers that were out there. Was there also a Sergeant Georgie out there?
Georgia.
Georgie?
Yes.
Okay. And he was tasked with interviewing neighbors to see if anybody saw or heard anything, correct?
He possibly did. I believe he did. Yes, he.
Okay. Now, the next morning, or I guess sort of later that morning, you spoke with Mr. Knight's sister and her boyfriend, Mr. Lewis, correct?
Yes.
And Mr. Lewis actually gave you some information that might shed some light on why this happened, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And this would have been the morning of April 26th of 2014, correct?
I'm sorry? What?
The morning of April 26th, 2014.
Yes.
Okay. Now, you attended the funeral of Mr. Knight, correct?
I did.
And that was the time when you met Ivan Ali, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. You didn't see him on that night, when you responded to the scene, correct?
No.
Okay.
No.
And the date of this was May 4th of 2014, correct?
May 4th, yes, ma'am.
You did not take a statement from him, correct?
No, he didn't want to provide a statement. It was, we were at the funeral home, and he was introduced to me, and I just started talking to him.
Okay. You didn't respond to his house at a later time or his work or anything? You tried to interview him about what he knew?
No, he didn't want to give me a statement.
Now, the next day, on May 5th, are you aware that Detective Toyota was speaking to some of the people that had been at the party?
Yes.
Okay, did you ask him, or did he do that on his own?
It was something collectively we talked about.
Okay, and one of the people he spoke to was Walter Stanley, correct?
I believe so, yes, ma'am.
Okay, and Marlon Williams?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So certainly by this point, you have become aware of how all of these people are connected and who's friends with who and all of that, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And you're aware of events that may have been relevant to what happened? Previous
Yes.
events, okay. Now, you, and I believe Detective Zeller interviewed Ms. Gambolas again on May 9th, correct?
I believe so.
You're not sure? If I show you the transcript of her statement, would that help you?
That was the Detective Zeller and I that interviewed her.
Okay, you and Detective Zeller on May 9th of 2014?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And you didn't ask her about any of these things, did you? The friends and the theory about why this happened, you didn't talk to her about that, did you?
I don't know that she was aware of any of this, the other stuff.
Okay, but you didn't ask her, right?
No, I don't believe so.
You indicate that you received information from a doctor who treated Mr. Knight about the cause of his death, is that correct?
That I interviewed a doctor?
No, that you received information. That's what you indicated in your report, correct?
I'm not sure what you're referring to. If you can, I didn't interview any doctor that
I'm not asking if you interviewed a doctor. I'm asking if you received information from a doctor. Just give me one moment, I'm sorry.
Judge, I'm going to object to hearsay anyway, receiving
Whoa. Too early, no questions pending yet.
The question is pending. Did you indicate that you received information from a doctor about the cause of death? My objection is hearsay.
Okay, right now, I'm overruling it, go ahead.
If I were to show you a document that you generated, would that perhaps refresh your recollection?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Judge, can we approach, please?
So you testified a moment ago, you didn't speak with any doctors at the hospital, correct?
No, I was told when I was at the scene, no, I didn't specifically know. I didn't speak to a doctor at the scene,
Okay.
at the hospital.
You testified that you attended the autopsy.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And you, in your report, you actually document injuries that you observed and photos were taken, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
But in my report, that's layman's terms. I'm not a doctor, so I you know,
It's okay,
I
we're not
asked-
criticizing you.
exactly.
Just asking. Okay. And you, for your case file, you actually receive a copy of the autopsy report, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Do you recall at what point in your investigation you received it?
I know at one point late, I asked for it, it still wasn't ready. I can refer to my report but as they're performing the autopsy, I'm there with the doctor that's performing it. So he's telling me what injuries, you know, plus the injuries that I've seen myself.
Right. But, I mean, you actually received a copy of his report?
Yes,
At some point?
at some
And that would
point.
be prior to July of 2014?
I'm not really sure what time, but I did get it at
Okay.
some point.
Okay. And with the autopsy report is also a toxicology report, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And as a detective, you're familiar with what a toxicology report is, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. It's a report that contains a toxicologist's findings of what drugs are in the system of the person who is examined, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, would it be fair to say that Mr. Knight's sister was very involved in the initial part of this investigation?
Yes, she was.
Okay. She called you frequently,
She did.
other detectives also?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. She was actually trying to help obtain information for you?
That's correct.
Okay. She was trying to get information out of Mr. McMath for you, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Ms. Gambolis was also involved some in the investigation in the beginning, correct?
She was there. She was, yeah.
Okay. And you actually spoke with her on April 28th. She called you, correct?
On the 28th,
Yes, sir.
I'm not sure what you're referring to. On the 28th, I met with Mr. Williams and got on.
Okay. If I show you a copy or the page
Sure.
on your report? Oh, yes.
I'm sorry, on April 28th?
Yes, sir.
Okay, yes, I did speak to her.
Okay. And at that time, she told you she'd gone online and found a picture of Mr. Elder, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and you actually told her, "No, don't do that, I want to show you a photo lineup," correct?
That's correct.
And it was later that day, a few hours later, that another detective showed her a photo lineup with Mr. Elder's picture in it, correct?
That's correct. We used a different photo.
Okay. You talked about finding the car that Mr. Elder was in. Did you take photos of the area? Or have someone take photos of the area?
I haven't reviewed the photos in a long time. I don't remember exactly if there were photos of the area. I do remember I was there. I drove the entire, because initially I responded to the address where Elder was living with his girlfriend, and I started looking for a beige Impala there. I found some beige Impalas, but they weren't the serial number that I was looking for.
Okay, now,
So to answer your question, I drove that entire parking lot up to the opposite end of the parking lot, and that's where I found the car.
okay, but you don't recall whether anyone took photos of the area?
No, ma'am.
Of the complex? Okay. And you knew at that time that he lived in that apartment with his girlfriend, Ms. Farrow, correct?
That was our understanding. There was, Detective Toyota did a research on the car, on him, on the girlfriend, and somehow matched up the addresses that he had put on something, and it matched to his girlfriend, and there was an Impala that was registered to her.
Okay. Did you talk with anybody at the apartment complex? Someone that works there?
Later, when we were trying to get surveillance video of the
Okay.
complex.
Did you talk to anyone about how the parking situation is?
No,
Okay, so you didn't talk to anybody about whether there are specific assigned spaces for cars,
no,
people that live there, or how many spaces a person is allowed to get,
no,
and where someone would park a car if they had more cars than they're allotted in their assigned spaces, correct?
no, I did not.
Okay. When you saw the car, you testified that there was blood all over it, inside, outside, correct?
Not all over it, on the passenger side of the car
Okay,
and on the inside of the car.
okay. And would it be fair to say that inside it was a little bit of a mess?
Yes,
Okay. And you didn't see any evidence that anyone had tried to clean it or remove evidence, correct?
no. But I can't testify to that. I don't know what was there prior
Okay.
to me finding.
But what you thought was blood was still there in the passenger seat?
Yes, ma'am.
You testified about, on May 9th, I believe, you executed the body warrant on Armando Baptista, correct?
On May 9th, yes, ma'am.
Okay. And so this would have been 2 weeks, pretty much, after the incident?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Do you happen to recall Mr. Baptista's weight at the time?
Weight?
Yes. If you don't know, that's fine.
No, I couldn't tell you. I mean,
Okay.
maybe 2.25, something like that. 200.
Okay. And when the body warrant was executed on Mr. Elder, he was in the hospital, correct?
Yes. That was on May 7th.
Okay. Judge, may I have just one moment?
Sure.
Were you aware that one of the residents of that neighborhood that was interviewed was, he lived right on the corner where this occurred, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And was any attempt made to go back and talk to him or his children who were there?
If I recall correctly, I believe it was Sergeant Georgi at the time that spoke to him, and I don't believe there was anything that he actually witnessed the incident.
Okay. Now, you asked Detective Zeller to try to obtain some phone records in this case, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. You didn't obtain or do a warrant to obtain the records from Mr. Knight's phone, correct?
I'm going to read.
Sure.
I believe it was Stanley's phone and Mr. Williams' phone. And I believe McNutt's phone.
Do you recall reviewing records from Mr. McNutt's phone?
I probably did. I don't recall what it said right now.
Okay. And you didn't make any attempt to obtain text logs for these people?
I'm sorry?
correct? Text messages from them?
Not sure if they were available because there's only, I think, maybe one company that keeps those records. And I'm not sure if they were available for these phones.
Okay. So you didn't try, or you just don't remember?
I'm sure we discussed it, and either if they would have been available, we would have gotten them. But I don't think they, like I said, I don't think they were available.
Okay. So, if there were text messages between Mr. Knight and Mr. McMath, you don't know anything about them, correct?
No, ma'am.
I don't have any more questions.
Redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Detective Bertrand, you were asked a lot of questions about how many times you conducted interviews of who. Was this an ongoing investigation?
Yes, ma'am.
And as you received information, would you then follow up on that information?
Yes, ma'am.
And does the follow-up as a homicide detective sometimes involve re-interviewing the witness?
Yes, it does.
Ms. Curtis asked you about the body warrant you executed on this Demetrius Elder on May 7th. Do you see Demetrius Elder in the courtroom today?
Yes, ma'am.
Hey, could you please point to him and identify him by an article of clothing?
He's dressed in the middle of both attorneys, black jackets, right?
When you executed the body warrant on the defendant, did you notice any injuries or did you document any injuries?
No, ma'am.
Ms. Curtis asked you about your, not participation, that you attended the autopsy, and then you told us that you documented the injuries you saw on the deceased victim, Mr. Knight.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you describe to us those injuries that you observed to Mr. Knight?
A lot of the injuries were all to the left side of his body. They were injuries that I would describe as defensive wounds. which also were consistent with witness.
Objection, calls for hearsay.
Sustained.
Okay, Detective Bertrand, please just describe to us the injuries
There
you
were-
observed.
There were cuts, deep cuts on the web of his left hand. There were cut to his forearm. There were also stab wounds to just underneath the armpit over here. There were several stab wounds alongside the left side of his torso and on the chest.
Did you observe or see any injuries to Mr. Knight's face?
There was also bruising on his face, on his cheek, and then also on the bridge of his nose. There was appeared to be a...
Okay,
Objection.
just,
Okay.
you told us what you observed, and that's
Okay.
what I was asking.
Right.
Thank you, Detective Bertrand. No further questions.
Thank you, Detective. You're excused. You can call your next witness.
Detective Stephen Toyota.
By the way, while they're doing that, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go till about 4:45 tonight. If you have to make any phone calls during a little break, we'll take a little bit later. And anytime you feel like you want to get up and stretch, feel free. I'm going to try and do a lot tonight, so we're probably going to take a short break later, but feel free to stand up and stretch at any time.
Yes.
What is it, sir?
Judge?
Raise your right hand. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please state your full name and spell your last name for the record.
Stephen Toyota, Toyota.
Detective, please make yourself comfortable. Pull up to the mic and state whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon, Detective Toyota.
Good afternoon.
Where do you work?
The Miramar Police Department,
How long have you worked there?
since 1993.
What is your job at the Miramar Police Department?
I'm a detective in the Crimes Against Persons Unit
How long have you been a detective in Crimes Against Person Unit?
since 2004.
How many investigations have you conducted in that unit?
Hundreds.
Prior to joining the unit as a detective, what was your job at the Miramar Police Department?
For the prior 7 years, I was in undercover narcotics,
And before that,
road patrol.
any other law enforcement experience other than what you told us regarding Miramar Police Department?
No,
Were you involved in an investigation for a case that started April 25th, 2014?
I was.
How were you involved?
I wasn't in town at the time the incident occurred, but a couple days later when I got back in town, I was asked to help out in the investigation.
Who asked you to help out?
Detective Bertrand,
And what was your role?
basically whatever he asked.
And was this an ongoing investigation from the time you got involved to the time of an arrest?
Yes,
Are you the person that arrested Demetrius Elder in this case?
Objection, relevance.
I'm sorry?
Objection to relevance.
I can't hear you.
I'm objecting to relevance. Not relevant.
Overruled, go ahead.
I'm not sure I'm the one who actually arrested him.
Okay, did you at some point have contact with Demetrius Elder?
I did.
And I want to draw your attention to July 24, 2014.
Okay,
Did you take a statement from Demetrius Elder?
I did.
Do you see Demetrius Elder in the courtroom today?
I do.
Would you please point to him and identify him by an article of clothing?
He's right there. He's wearing a black shirt, black jacket.
When you took the statement, did you document it in any way?
It was recorded, audio recorded.
And before you took the statement, did you go over the Miranda rights form?
During the statement, yes.
I'm showing defense counsel what's been marked as State Exhibit G for identification and State Exhibit H for identification. May I approach?
Yes.
Detective Toyota, without telling us what's written on anything, would you please tell me if this is State Exhibit G is the rights waiver form that you administered to Demetrius Elder on July 24, 2014?
It is.
At this time, Your Honor, the state moves what's been marked as State Exhibit G into evidence.
State 7.
Right.
And I'm showing you State Exhibit H for identification. Is this a disc with a recording on it?
Yes.
Okay. At this time, the state moves what's been marked as State Exhibit H into evidence.
State's 8.
Okay.
Permission to publish both 7 and 8, to both State Exhibit 7 and State Exhibit 8 to the jury.
Go ahead. Let her get it marked.
Yes, sorry, Judge, I'm bringing this back. Judge, actually, I'm going to ask to publish State Exhibit 8 a little bit later and ask the Detective Toyota to stay around if he's available.
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you. Detective Toyota, who was with you when you took the defendant's statement on July 24th, 2014?
Detective Zeller, Z-E-L-L-E-R.
And did you have any other involvement in the investigation of the case that I haven't asked you about?
I did.
Can you tell us what you did?
Okay. I interviewed Ashley Farrow at the time. That was Demetrius Elder's girlfriend. Initially, well, let me go a little bit more chronological. Initially, I was trying to assist them in locating or identifying a vehicle, potential vehicle, of the suspects. Within a couple of days, they had a suspect developed, and we started looking into Demetrius Elder and the co-defendant, Armando Batista. And I made contact with both Elder and Farrow on the same day. I again made contact with Elder.
Judge, can we approach?
Is that your boss?
Judge, can we also have the witness step out?
Okay.
Can we have the witness step out, please?
Oh, I'm sorry, Detective.
Should I leave this here, or okay with me?
What's that?
Should I leave this here?
You can leave that there. We just need you to step out, please. I have trouble hearing you. Come on up here.
Okay. She's referencing the previous contacts he had with Mr. Elder, where Mr. Elder invoked his right to an attorney and didn't want to speak with them.
That's not what he said.
Well, he said he made contact with the jury.
Well, hold on. Go ahead.
The jury can then speculate as to why he's having these contacts with him and what was said and what's going on.
Law enforcement makes contact with suspects all the time. I have instructed him that I am not asking him about any prior attempt to speak to Demetrius Elder by getting a statement from him or that he invoked his right. And if we can proceed, then I'll ask leading questions.
No. I'm going to deny the motion for mistrial. I mean, well, I can't comment or give any opinion on, the question that was asked and where he's going, but at this point, based on the motion, I'm going to deny the motion for mistrial. Since they're out now, let's take a couple minutes now. We've been going an hour and a half.
Okay, may I remind Detective Toyota of that, even though he's a witness on the stand? I did tell him. Or whatever, I'm going to move on.
Yeah, but if you want to instruct him of that, so be it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, take a few minutes.
Actually, I don't want to.